This is not related to Centric whatsoever. I found this on YouTube. It's the best example. The whole thing is really good. It's 25 minutes, but we'll only watch it. But what they've done is they use the brake dyno because, you know, if you're racing and you go in and it's a 24-hour race or whatever, and you change pads, put on fresh rotors, and go back out on the track, in turn one you're going to crash because those pads are not better than any other. If you're going to be in a race and you're going to have to change pads, they pre-burnish pads and rotors. They make those surfaces for the race because the material's not bedded in. Because what everybody seems to think is that we're just grabbing onto the rotor and clamping. The reality, that's not, I mean, yes, that's happening, but there's also an engineering reaction happening of material mating up with its own material that becomes like, say, glue. I really talk, if you want the engineering stuff, go to our website. I talk in terms, okay? So, you know, and what you're constantly doing is, think about ripping off some duct tape, and then you got the residue on there, and you have to, you know, do this to roll all the duct tape off. In essence, that's basically what's going on constantly on the rotor surface. You're putting on new material, as it wears out, it wipes it off, puts more material. That process just keeps repeating itself over and over and over again, until the pad's worn out. So, this is a great video. You actually get to see the material bedding into the metal. See it starting to come in? It's turning gray.
Build here, set this up, doubles are very much in the degree plus 2. So it's a series of stops with set pressure, with certain speeds that we do. It's very dependent on the type of finish you want to achieve, but I just ran a basic one just to show you.
See the raw surface, they're brand new.
Burnish versus the raw.
So this is the color of the pad material. All pads are black, pretty much, or light gray or something. This rotor's ready, that rotor is not. Okay, what happens is, and why they do this so on a dyno and stuff, and they'll tell you, you can do it on the street, but like for racing purposes, you want to know exactly what's going on for racing purposes. Yes, you can do it on the street. I've done it on the street, everyone can do it on the street. But what can happen is, you get the pad too hot, all right? And as soon as that surface of that pad gets super hot, it just lets go and dumps itself onto the rotor surface, okay? The reason your customers don't come back right away when that happens is because it's not that bad. Usually it's just like, maybe it's only at a certain speed they'll start feeling it, you know, or it's real intermittent in the beginning, okay? But then what happens is you've now created a high spot on that rotor, and every time that pad goes by that high spot, it picks up a little bit more material. So by the 2 to 3 month time period goes by, they're coming back to you going, my freaking dash is shaking. And they're like, why didn't you come back sooner? And they said, well, it wasn't that bad in the beginning, you know. You think about it, if a rotor was gonna work, it's not gonna warp and then warp every week to 3 months and get worse and worse and worse. I mean, if it did work, it'd be more like an emergency braking situation, and they wouldn't be getting one of those every single week that's gonna make the rotor warp more and more and more. Okay. So it's an uneven transfer of friction. Now, I'm sure everybody here has put a rotor on a brake lathe and said that rotor's warped, sure as shit. What you're cutting off is the pad material that's built up on the rotor surface that you just saw. You're not cutting the actual rotor, you're cutting the pad. I've seen the pad get hot and basically dump half the rotor. And then the other half, like it looks like it's warped. Yes, the surface of that rotor is not, doesn't have this, it has thickness variances that are causing breakage. Okay. The worst thing you can do is not ask questions to the driver of the vehicle about what they were doing, what kind of driving they're doing, are they towing, you know, just parameters to try to solve the problem. You've got to ask those questions to get the feedback. If you put the same pad on that car that you took off that had a warped rotor, guess what you're going to have again? Another brake job. Because you didn't help the person. You put on the same pad that caused the problem in the beginning, problem is we keep wanting to blame the rotor, we swap rotors, it solves the problem, but then the problem comes back. The problem comes back because we didn't match the pad material to the driver's style. Now, this took some convincing for me before I start coming out talking about this. And convincing for me was something that you guys typically don't have a chance to experience. A fleet of 100 vehicles that are identical. The only difference in the police fleet, say Crown Vics, is the guy behind the wheel. So you can do a lot of interesting things as a guy like me going in there and trying different materials because you know the only variable is the guy behind the wheel. So that 106 performance pad, that thing works great on 98. If the guy's got 100 cars, it works perfect on 98. There's 2 cars that guy's gonna have, it's gonna have brake jump. And the 2 cars are the guy that was the rookie of the year and the runner-up of the year. Those 2 guys drive it like they freaking stole it. They run it hotter than the 106 is designed to run. All I have to do is move them up to a fleet performance pad with a higher heat range. And guess what stops happening? They stop working rotors. They stop working brake jump. Ultimately, what we want to do is stop the comebacks and stop the brake jumping. When we continue to put the same material on there. And the reason we're putting the same material on there is why? We're blaming the rotor. We're always blaming the rotor. We're not blaming the material that's being laid onto the rotor, that's being married and mated to the rotor. So just, think about that as you go through and you're trying to solve problems.
So what happens when you do a brake job, pads and rotors? Everything's essentially no rust, and put it on, you have work brake rotor right out.
Could be a rotor. Could be a ton of other things too. Rust on that. It's usually rust base for that. A lot of times, someone will tell me it's a warped rotor, and these have been, for me, people that I did the brake job for, and they're like, man, an old friend of mine in Florida got an M45, and drilled and slotted high carbon rotors on his Infinity, everything he needed, and he's like, my rotors are working. Like, no way. I put that on a cop car. You don't drive like that. There's no freaking way you got brake rotors that brake system. So I went out and I drove. Beat the crap out of it, and I would jam on that brake, and for the first 3 seconds, it'd go, and then it would smooth out. Once that bearing got loaded up, that was bad in there, it stopped the vibration. If the rotor's the problem, it will continue all the way till you come to a dead stop. If it's the bearing that's the problem, usually once you get a heavy load on there, it'll start juddering, and then it smooths out. But the pad, it's still grabbing on the rotor face, so if that was the case, it's going to pulse all the way. So, and there's a lot of external factors. I'm the Mosul rep. It's another thing I talked about, are external factors that cause a catalytic converter to fail. The converter has no moving parts. If it fails, something screwed it up. Yeah.
I'm torquing the wheel with an action.
That can cause it too.
So what happens to the wheel when you don't torque the wheel? What happens to the rotor when you don't torque it?
What happens to the rotor when you don't? If you over torque it, then the rotor gets bad. Especially if there's still some rust on it.
It's not torqued properly.
It could get that kind of work. Look, I love the questions. They're awesome. Okay, and I'm glad you're asking, because sometimes I forget stuff. If the car leaves your shop and it's been gone for 3 months and never had an issue, and they come back with brake judder, it's friction transfer. Almost never seen. Okay? It's not going to leave the shop with what you're talking about. It's not going to leave the shop with what you're talking about. The rust on the torque and those things. Your test drive is going to tell you right then and there that you have brake judder. Have I seen some of my brand new rotors that out of the box were warped? Yes, I have. Have I seen a bunch of them? I can count on one hand counting them. I've not just.
Does it make a difference if you stack them up?
No, that's another huge.
Come on, I've heard about that.
I had this old guy in Tampa one time. I went in, he had no space, and I'm like, I knew he was old school. He would not let me stack them on the side, so I didn't even ask him. I just did it because it was the only way I could make everything fit in the shop. He had a fit. He had a flip and fit, man. He called up Tech, and he's like, "There's no way this can be right." And they're like, and Tech's telling him, "It's fine, it's fine. Does your warehouse get up to 2,000 degrees? Otherwise, you're fine." It's not. I mean, man, I've dropped rotors moving them around. I put them back on the shelf. You're not gonna freaking. It's not.
Oh, you got that one, didn't you?
How many did we drop here, Derek? That's a myth. What rotors is a myth. You just gotta change the way you're looking at some of these things. To ultimately, what I want you guys to do is have fewer comebacks and solve problems. The best thing you guys can do is get good word of mouth from your customers. You do a good job for them. You solve a problem, they tell 1,000 people. You don't solve a problem, they tell 10,000 people. I want them to zone in the 1,000 good friends they have with some money that want to come in and get the car fixed at your guys. By equipping you with some knowledge on the friction materials that you don't know. Look, brake jobs are really easy. It's good, quick money for everybody. But we've really gotten lazy about how we're looking at it.
Another suggestion, I would say use a sandblast to clean the caliper racket.
Okay.
Because nobody got time for that to use the file. Different files are sitting there.
Yeah, if it's off.
Because the sandblast is completely contained, and then it turns it into it's like random.
That's the bomb. The only other thing that the Snap-on guy, they got like this little bitty file, like a belt sander, with this handheld battery. Yeah, I saw one of those ones, and I'm like, man, that's a good one.
Sandblast is actually
No, you can't leave the sandblast. Yeah, you're not contaminating copper or something. How am I looking on time? 10 more minutes? Okay. What do you got? Here's a hot one for you. I guarantee you one thing, you will see the pad imprint on that rotor when it's done. You will see the outline of the pad. When you see the outline of the pad on the rotor, you got super hot, they sat there with their foot on the brake, at the light, whatever. That's how you're going to get it. Okay. Let's talk about more rotors. When's the last time you were watching a race, NASCAR, whatever you watched? The announcer came on and he said, "Holy crap, the leader's out of the race, he just warped his rotors." You never heard that. It doesn't happen. Because those guys know the type of pad material they need to put on that car. They put the right pad material on it. There's two grades of metal. There's G3000, which is your standard white box rotor, and there's G4000, which is like your high carbon and your premium stuff. You can play around with that a little bit, get cheaper and whatnot, but really there's only two. Like, look at that rotor. Your customers' rotors aren't getting like that, but yet they come back with a brake job. This guy didn't have any brake job. His rotor's blown. Rotors can blow and not warp. It happens every weekend at racetracks all around the world because they have the right pad material, knowing that that rotor is going to be that hot. They just have the right friction material on there that doesn't cause that issue. That's not the sound we're looking for. You guys are slowing down. Alright, I'm going to finish up with these little rotor clips here real quick. These are the kind of things that happen when the iron's not the right temperature. The crazy thing about this is they actually put the crosshatch finish on that. They were probably going to send it out the door. Sometimes they'll patch that hole. I haven't personally seen that, but they got through the first little circle cut there and found this one. All right, so now these are the good factories. These are the factories you want to have your stuff produced at, okay? One thing about China, guys, we ship most of our good equipment over there about 10 years ago. So, do you get a lot of crappy product out of China? Absolutely. Can you get really good product out of China? Absolutely. You just can't trust them. And you got two-seater. I thought you were Korean, man. I'm sorry.
Hey, distant cousins. I don't talk shit about white people all day.
Hey, I'm not a forward to the term crap.
I challenge that statement.
So, nicer equipment. These are our castings. They're on conveyor belts. They're not on the floor. The iron is on a gantry crane, motorized, so it can move at the proper speed and get and for the proper time. Our guys have hard hats.
Nothing will go and kill this arm.
No other brake rotors made in that factory?
Huh?
No other brake rotors made in that factory, just yours?
No, some OEs use this factory too. Yeah, it's not hard to figure out who the OE is. And they have to be a CS69.
They're not from
Yeah, they are. Well, that's one of the things they're doing is you can go buy a rotor from your local whatever dealer. It ain't the OE rotor anymore. It used to be. They got tired of getting their butts kicked. It's not the OE pad anymore either. You would really have to specify. Look, if it's not the OE Toyota on or whatever pad, just don't send it to them. They probably have that, but they're going to have more now of the rotors. Again, conveyor belts. You can see the molten iron there, and it's just it's a true manufacturing process.
That's in the back.
One of the things that gets a little bit underlooked at with our rotors is everybody likes the way they come out of the box and how they look. But the proof in the pudding is spray it with salt water for 400 hours and see how it dries. Okay? This is an electrostatically adhered coating on all the premium rotors. This isn't just spray paint. You can't just take a rag with some brake cleaner or this or that on it and wipe it off. And the reason we do this is because, look, this rotor doesn't give a shit about it. Doesn't care about what it looks like here. It doesn't care about what it looks like here. What it cares about is what goes on inside there and what happens right here. It doesn't want the rust to build up back here, causing the rotor to cock and have brake charge. And it doesn't want the rust to build up in here, causing the rotor to go hot in certain spots and reduce your performance. That's why we electrostatically coat the rotor and dip the entire rotor in. We negatively charge the rotor and dip in positively charged paint. This is what's best for the rotor. We're not doing what's best for the eye. That's what our competitors do.
And please, hey, when you guys are
Basically.
ordering the coated rotors from our